very happy to welcome you all to this maiden Saturday 10 a.m. event of academic year 23-24, as well as the 44th in a row. I also welcome our guest, Dr. Ravi Veeraraghavan Gomatam, Director, Institute of Semantic Information Sources and Technology, for accepting our invitation. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, thank you.
It's even more interesting to start the season with this dialogue on modern science vis-a-vis Bhagavad Gita. Rather, I would put it the other way around, Bhagavad Gita versus modern science, because Bhagavad Gita is scripted, I think, somewhere around 5,116 years ago, whereas modern science is 16th or 17th century. This will definitely make the youth to rediscover the ancient scripts with renewed curiosity and interest. You all must have heard Robert Oppenheimer, the Manhattan Project and the father of atomic bomb. He also contributed in quantum mechanics and nuclear physics. And when he was testing his bomb, the Trinity, before those two which went off in Japan, the Trinity was first tested in New Mexico. At that time, he recollected, Kalosmi lokat kshayakrit pravruddho lokan samahartu mihat pravruttaha rutepi tvam nabhavishyanti sarve evasthitaha pratyanikeshu yodhaha. What he said is that, I am the mighty, I am the Almighty who can destroy everything. Whether you, Arjuna, you are there or not, these people who are there on the other side, they are going to cease to exist. So, what he said is that, but that energy, what he used, and today we are using it for nuclear power and all those things. And I'm pretty sure who could else be the right person to invigorate this thought process on the topic other than Dr. Ravi, who also holds a doctorate in quantum mechanics. And at his institutes, he guides to balance between epistemology, philosophies of mathematics and science on one side, and philosophies of cognition, computing, and comparison on the other. So I don't want to stand anymore between you and our guest and wish a good debate. Thank you for your precious time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you for your words, sir. So now coming back to our speaker, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Professor Ravi Gomatam. He has a master's degree in electronics engineering and a PhD in the foundations of quantum mechanics. He is the director of the Institute for Semantic Information Sciences and Technology, affiliated with the University of Mumbai. He is also the director of Bhaktivedanta Institute, offering a research program in consciousness studies in collaboration with BITS Pilani. He is currently an active research scientist developing his own new post-quantum theory in physics. He has published 44 research papers in peer-reviewed journals, book anthologies, and major international conferences. His scientific work on foundation of quantum physics organically connects science to religion in general and to Vedic Vaishnava region in particular. So now I'd like to request our guest to say a few words. Please, sir.
Okay, I guess I may be saying more than a few words because we have got 1 hour.
No problem, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm very pleased that Dr. Desai, your director, is also here, and that's a very nice and exemplary inspiration for students. Did you say 24 papers or 44 papers?
I said 44 papers.
No, 44 it is. That's okay. That's just a minor detail, not very important. Well, today's topic is something that that is being handled in many places in many different ways. And I would like to, of course, thank the organizers of this program to be inviting me for this talk. Indeed, the Bhagavad Gita is, 5,000 years ago it was spoken, so it has priority over modern science. But nevertheless, modern science today has what we call a very privileged epistemological status, in the sense that scientific knowledge is valued highly. In fact, the very word knowledge is in many quarters associated only with science. There is a schoolgirl a small child wrote to Einstein, it's in his book Ideas and Opinions, asking him, what does he think about religious knowledge? So Einstein replied that scientific knowledge, I have some idea what it is, but religious knowledge, and he put knowledge in italics and put a question mark, meaning that it can be only faith or, something like that, but not knowledge. Because knowledge in the West in the last 500 years, as Dr. Desai said, has developed in the form of modern science. And that knowledge is called empirical knowledge. And the word empirical comes from the Greek word empiri, and empiri means experience. And experience basically means sense experience. Not, one could have some experience while one is dreaming or introspecting, like that. Those are not considered as experience. Observations are a particular type of experience called sense experience or outer experience. Suppose if I said the dinner I had last night was very good, I'm experiencing something, but that's called inner experience. Whereas if I said the meter needle is pointing to +1, that's outer experience. So all science is based on observations, and observations are outer experiences. Okay, so I, of course, as it was said, I had done my master's in engineering from BITS Pilani. Then I went to the States. I worked in the area of system software and all of that. And you would think like I would know something about science, but much later, when I started working in this area, I realized that there is actually two aspects to science. One is the application of science. The other is what's called the foundations. Just like, you have the building, and the building has foundations. On top of it is an actual building in which you live. So most people live in a building and they know nothing about the foundations. And while living in the building, you can actually use the building. And if you want to renovate, you don't have to even move out of the building. You can renovate one room. Let's say that you have a kitchen, and then you can renovate the kitchen while cooking in the living room. And you can renovate the bedroom by sleeping in the living room, like that. So in science, you can make advancement without actually changing the foundations. So the foundations of science, what it is and who created it, is not taught. And I realized that in all my studies, we were just trained to be users of science, but not actually understanding the concepts in science. And of course, I'm coming now from the viewpoint of physics that has been worked on this for decades. And, so I had to kind of go back, despite my master in science and all that. I had to go back and re-understand science in order to actually, because Srila Prabhupada, who's established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, also established a scientific wing of it. And he, inspired me to work in this institute. So when I was in Detroit, I came in touch with, this institute, and I joined. And that's a long time ago. And I realized that if I'm going to connect, the concepts of reality from Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, to science, I have to understand science fundamentally well, because the connection is at the foundations, not in the application level. So when you want to change foundations, you have to actually give up. You cannot live in the building and change the foundations. You have to move out. Similarly, if you want to change the foundations of science, you cannot continue to be a scientist in the current sense and also expect to work in the foundations. So very, very few people work in the foundations of physics. And these are people generally who actually create, new forms of science, not merely apply existing science, which is what we learn when we study engineering and stuff like that, or even pure sciences. So it will be very difficult for me to condense 44 years of my work into a 25-minute talk. And, but I would like to, I try to give a overall overview of the whole work, which is like a trailer. And maybe, one way to further interact would be, for qualified people, students, to do their projects, in science only. It's not so easy to take a scientific project and connect it to Bhagavad Gita. This is, there are generally, so let me just go here. So, okay, so I'll just go here. I'll come out of this and I have to add here. So one of the ways that people generally think is that whatever is in modern science is already in a Vedic text. Bhagavatam is a Vedic text. There is the range of Vedic text is very vast. Hundreds and thousands of books are there. And okay, so that's one view of that. This view is not very convincing, because people could ask, if everything is in the Vedas, then why is the people say Ravana had Pushpaka Vimana, Ashwatthama had Brahmastra, atomic bomb, and things like that. Drona was born in a Droni, and Droni means, petridation. So the in vitro fertilization was there in the olden times. Claims are made. It is not necessary to say that that's false, but one kind of a question that could be response that will be given by scientists, and they give it, is that if everything is in the Vedic text, why don't you do something before we do? Why is it that when we design a plane or a computer or an atomic bomb, then you say it is in the Vedas? And that's a reasonable question. In fact, John Bell is one of the top quantum physicists. Actually, his work on hidden variable theories, when it was experimentally verified this year, Nobel Prize, went to Zeilinger and two others, based on John Bell's work. So as early as 1978, Omni is like Scientific American, a science magazine. I don't think it's any longer there, but in those days it was well known. And these people interviewed Bell because Bell was the head of the theoretical physics division at CERN, and he had invited Maharishi to come because he was working on quantum mechanics. And it was thought incorrectly, as I hope to explain a little bit in this talk. He was to see what Eastern views could bring this problem back, solvable. Then the Omni people asked him, why did you invite Maharishi to CERN? That is a very bad thing for science, because you are giving authenticity to these people who claim that, some Eastern thought has got something to do with modern science. Then he replied that now the test for a scientist of whether these religious people have something to contribute to science is to ask them not to interpret what we have done already, but to tell us what is going to happen next. If they can tell us the mass of the Higgs boson, at that time it was not discovered, but now it is. He said, and if we find it there, we are all going to learn their philosophies. We will all go and sit at the feet of Maharishi if he tells us where the Higgs boson is to be found. In other words, he's saying that you do something before we do. I remember I was introduced to the head of a very prominent Hindu association or movement or whatever it is. And that person, they told him that he's a monk and he's also a scientist. Then he said, "Oh, I'm very happy that you're showing that whatever is in modern science is in the Vedas." And I said, no, that's not what I'm doing. He said, "Oh, then what are you doing?" I said, "No, whatever is not in modern science yet, that's what I'm going to show this in the Vedas," which is same as what Dr. Bell was asking for. And quite surprisingly, 1 year before Dr. Bell interview was 78 and 77, Prabhupada, when establishing this institute, said that apart from Puranas and Vedic literature, scientifically, it is a modern science. According to their way, we can convince. Puranas, you may not believe the authority, I may not believe, but scientific truth has to be accepted. So the idea is actually to work within science, right? So then I go back here, and because I'm going to be typing, I'm out of the display mode. So the second idea, of course, is also there, that they may not claim that whatever is in current sciences in the olden times, but they say, but Indians also had a lot of these ideas, like the Kerala School of Mathematics did work on analysis and precursor to calculus and things like that. That's also still history of physics, history of science. And how are we going to do the future of science? Now, there is also a lot of, presentations about Srinivasa Ramanujan, mathematician, who said that, the goddess Lakshmi in Namagiri, dictated to him whatever he was, writing. Now, that, of course, from the religious point of view, we accept it as true. But the fundamental point is that whatever he did was part of the regular mathematics of the time. And of course, much of his work is so brilliant that it's, people expect it to be, they're applicable now to many advanced topics in various fields of science and engineering. Notwithstanding all of that, the fact remains that, what is it that he has done that connects it to, the religious thought, other than the fact that, he says that Namagiri, Lakshmiji, inspired him to write these equations, because equations themselves are only in the basis of modern pure mathematics, number theory. I hope you all follow this point. So these ideas are also there, history of physics. And then, also, working only in contemporary science. So the work that I'm doing is actually to develop the next phase, I can put it in capitals, science. So, and this is now, so let's say that this is actually based on Bhagavad Gita. Now, I'm trying to develop the next phase in science. And in science, the choice of problem is always the most critical thing. When you select most people, when they do PhD, they don't succeed in making a good PhD because they may not have a good problem. So one of the important aspects of a guide is to suggest the choice of a problem for doing PhD, or even when you do projects, BTech and all that, your guides, their main role is to suggest a problem area, which you can work on. And of course, now in India, when I was studying in the 60s and all that, that's a long time ago, we were just at least 30 years behind West in things. But slowly by 1980s, 90s, many Indians had gone to America and they came back. And now, in 2020, all the boys are, even in undergrad, they are trying to have startups and they do stuff, but it's all within existing science. Okay. So now, what exactly can be the connection between Bhagavad Gita? By that I mean the Vedic pantheon of thought and modern science. So the Vedic literatures talk of course, God, and then they talk about soul or consciousness, and time, matter, and karma. So, of these 5 topics, you see, this one is actually what is important for science. So, what science studies is actually that matter by itself. So, the fundamental idea of science is a thesis called materialism, which is in its other variations is called physicalism, and reductionism, things like that, mechanism, and all of this. So, of course, when this idea of materialism is that matter is the only thing that exists, and everything has to be understood in terms of matter. So, whereas the Vedic texts treat all these topics that I put in the previous slide in an integrated manner. So one can ask, then science is different because it doesn't involve assumptions of God or soul. Time also is not there in science. It's actually matter. Matter is studied in terms of motion, and time is also comparison of motion. When you say it takes 5 minutes for the car to go from A to B, you're not really talking about time, but there's a periodic motion that's called the clock. And when the clock moves from 12 to 12:05, then the car has gone from A to B. So one motion, namely the car motion, is compared to the motion of the clock. So in science, time is actually, the technical term is that it's not an ontological category. And so everything is studied in terms of matter. That's an example of reductionism, that what is called time that you feel is reduced to actually, comparison of motion. So it's called parametric time. In this way, things, so now the point is that I just wanted to show one, so when Krishna is describing in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 7th canto, he says, Bhumi Rapu Analo Vayu Kamano Buddhirevacha Ahankaramiti Emme Binna Prakriti Ashtata. He says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, all together these 8 constitute my separated material energies. So Krishna makes a very interesting point. Binna Prakriti means separated, energy of, Krishna says is energy of mind. So it means that one can separate matter from God and study. So materialism need not be the idea. So I actually, in my work, I've redefined materialism. Materialism is not the idea that there's only matter in existence. It is not necessary to make such a strong statement in science, and especially in physics, because you cannot prove that there are no other energies. But what you could say is that, for example, it's very obvious, for some people, it's obvious that the subject, the conscious person, is, in some fundamental way distinct from matter. So it's called dualism. So when we actually have experience, outer experiences, as I told you, I'm required as a conscious person to have the experience. If there's a table, I have the experience of seeing a table. And matter is also required. So experience is a combination of the object to be perceived and the subject who is perceiving. So we can say materialism is the idea that we only ask in the beginning, what is the contribution of matter to experience? So if we redefine the idea of science in that way, then we could actually study everything just in terms of matter, and still we don't have to deny, other things, because we have redefined materialism. Is that point clear to everybody? I hope so. So I'm of course just laying the foundation, and it's not a simple thing, this field. As I said before, it's a very serious work for me, and I'm not just for hand waving and saying things, because we have to actually. So now the question would be, this matter, separated matter in terms of earth, water, fire, air, and my intelligence and false ego. The Westerners think that even Greeks had this idea, but the Vedic idea is very different from the Greek idea. Actually, recently I was in London, and I gave a paper in a conference there, showing that the Vedic concepts of matter about these elements are very different from the Greek thought. So here is a very unique thing in the Bhagavad Gita, that one can actually, connect, matter as a separate energy with, science. So I'm just showing points where you can make a connection, because without connecting to matter, there's no way you can connect ideas of consciousness, God, and all that to science. Now, I want to show another thing. Yeah. So now here is another statement in the Bhagavad Gita. I'm just giving a sample. So material energy is working under my direction, he says, Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita. Maya adhyakshena. You see? And so you can see that I put it in red. Now, this is not what science seems to be apparently saying, because science says that the material nature is working according to immutable laws. If you drop an object, if an apple falls from the tree, it'll fall down to the ground. It won't fly in the sky. You cannot show that by praying, I can make Krishna make the apple go up. Actually, there is one Nobel laureate called Anthony Hewish in Cambridge. He told me that once, long time ago. So, therefore, that's the fundamental difference between science and religion, But this is not, that's a very superficial way, because even though he's a Nobel laureate in astrophysics, he didn't actually understand physics very well. And that's true, of all. Most of you may not know that something like Newton's mechanics, that was developed by Newton 500 years ago, is still being understood. So the fundamental concepts of that are, highly, debated. For example, is space and time are absolute or relational, and it's one of the cutting edge areas of physics, and that's in Newton's mechanics. So many times scientists actually develop some theories, even they don't know how they have developed it. They get ideas and they just develop it, and then when everybody's thinking, what does this mean? So one of the important things I would like to say here, just to give another sample of how to think. This is why you need to know very deeply science before you can actually understand. So this idea that the claim that matter is working under Krishna's direction or God's direction is incompatible with science, people would say, because matter is working according to causal laws. So determinism, Brooks, no extra causes, people would say, but that's actually not understanding the nature of science. So if you want to understand what is science, and especially I'll come from the physics viewpoint, and physics underlies everything, you have the realm of observations, right? And science creates a world, the world of mathematics. Math. So now I have to teach you what is mathematics, because what we learn is actually applied mathematics. That you learn differential equations, calculation, integration, calculus, geometry. This is not mathematics, it's applied mathematics. Mhm. Pure mathematics is very different. I would like to give a lecture on what is pure mathematics. All of this should be known before you can even enter the citadel of science and religion, especially science and Bhagavad Gita. So, mathematically, you actually, the fundamental idea of mathematics is space. It's an abstract idea, and space is a collection of objects, just as, we have in the lived world, it's a collection of objects, but these are mathematical objects. So, for example, this most fundamental space is, the real line or two-dimensional XY thing, that's R2. Or you have a three-dimensional space. You can have, you all learn, this is XYZ, and that's R3 space. So this R3 space consists of points. The point is a mathematical object. This point could mean anything. It could be a number, it could be functions. There are different spaces. So generally, physics proceeds by selecting a space, a mathematical space, which is an abstract space. And there are objects. And Newton, for example, space is R3, and a point there is actually an object. So when in the Newton's mechanics, according to that, you have sun and you have earth going around the sun, we say like that. That's not actually the real sun that you see, or the earth in which you live. These are 2 points in mathematical space. And if you agree to call them sun and earth, and if you say that this point is going around this point, and you attach some physical properties to each point, the mass of the sun and, the location of the sun and its velocity and all of that. So there is a mutual dynamical interaction by which you can get a mathematical equation. So in this abstract world, what is called sun and moon or earth are just points. And then you write an equation F equal to mx2 dot, or, then from that you can get the laws of motion, things like S equal to ut plus half at squared. Then this abstract mathematical space has got no connection with this world of observations. So when the sun is going in this world, moving around the earth, that has nothing to do with this physics at all. This is not taught, in schools and colleges. So we are just simply saying, science has proved that, the sun is not going around the earth and the earth is going around the sun. It's all very unfortunate ways of teaching. So you have an abstract thing. Here you can do anything. You can make the earth go like this also. It's you'll have to write a mathematical equation for that. Doesn't make a difference. But what is required is that finally, when you solve this equation, you will get for t equal to t1, you will get x equal to x1, some numbers you will get. Those numbers have to turn up as meter readings when you do experiments in the world. Then this is the basis of all science. If you look at agricultural science also, it's based on all of these things, but it's not taught like that. So the idea is that the laws of science apply not to this world of observations. Apple is not falling according to Newton's law, but in the abstract world of mathematics, an abstract point called apple is falling according to the Newton's equation, and it's called physics. Now, an important idea of science, which we are not taught, and it is very established in philosophy of science in the modern times, is actually we are not taught philosophy of science, which I think should be taught. I would like to teach a full course, but see, if the Indian government has got this Indian knowledge system and all that, but they have no idea about foundations of science. I would like to teach a course on foundations of science for students. Anyway, that's so this is called underdetermination. This is the last idea I'll introduce. But like this, there are thousands of ideas I have developed, in order to connect Bhagavad Gita to modern science. So it's not really a simple joke or, whatever one wants to say. And if you go to my website, you will see scholarly appreciations, even Nobel laureates saying that my work can change science. So it is a result of 44 years of hard work. So underdetermination hypothesis, you see, is the idea that this is underdetermination hypothesis. This idea that it is not only one mathematical theory that can predict observations. It is in the history of science, I'm talking about physics now primarily, that, the same observations can be predicted by different theories. Different theories. So, for example, the apple falling is not only predicted by Newton's mechanics, which has got this Euclidean space R3, but it's also predicted by Einstein's theory of relativity, which uses a different mathematics called Riemannian manifold. And its idea of why the apple is falling is not due to gravity, it's due to curvature in space-time. So underdetermination hypothesis says that different physical views, which is coming from mathematics, can predict the same observations. Therefore, it is not possible to say merely because a physical theory is making correct predictions that this is how the world is. In fact, the standard idea in physics now is that we cannot know how the world works. We can only make predictions. That's known as the anti-realist view. That's another topic I need to teach all of you. So I'll wrap it up now by saying that before you can, connect Bhagavad Gita to science, you should understand Bhagavad Gita first very deeply, but even before that, you should understand modern science very deeply. The unfortunate issue in modern times is that there are four kinds of people working in the area of science and religion. There are religious people who know no science, and then there are scientists who know no religion. Then you have got religious people who don't know religion, and you have scientists who don't know science. So these four kinds of people are trying to connect science and religion. It's unfortunate. And I have not done that kind of work. In both areas, I've done, a lot of work. And that's the introduction to this field. So we can discuss more, but I'll stop here and take questions.
Actually, my question is, what does Bhagavad Gita say about the human mind, consciousness, and oneself?
There was a set of questions was sent to me, and one of the questions was that modern science has shown, neuroscience has shown that consciousness is coming from the brain. And, so what does Bhagavad Gita have to say about it? These are not proper presentations of science. In neuroscience, we don't study consciousness. We study what is called NCC, neural correlates of consciousness. In other words, for example, if somebody says that, okay, we have enough experimental techniques that you can plant, say, electrodes in somebody's brain, and you can study, or you can do, PET scan and things like that. And so you do what is called NCC, neural correlates of consciousness. That if somebody is thinking about the apple, then, maybe one part of the brain is, firing, and then somebody is talking about something else, and another part of the brain, so they try to correlate the various states of consciousness you have to various ways in which the brain functions. That is only correlation. It's not causal. And so in neuroscience, there is absolutely no room for the claim that we can explain consciousness. In fact, there are many fundamental open problems in the science of consciousness, such as the problem of color problem, and the binding problem, and the zombie problem, and things like that. There are many issues out there in the field of consciousness studies. In fact, I'm one of the people who started the field of consciousness studies in the world in 1990, when I did a first international conference on consciousness and science in San Francisco. 3 Nobel laureates and 14 other scholars were speakers there. I also presented a paper from the viewpoint of artificial intelligence at that time. So this is a very deep topic, but as far as Bhagavad Gita is concerned, it's a very sophisticated system in which there is a clear distinction between mind, consciousness, and soul, the self. So both what is called the apparent consciousness, the I we have. What is this thing? It's saying that turn ink into shapes and text. No, I don't want that. Suppose if I make a statement, I see a nice brown table. See? So which parts of it is coming from the world? You remember I said materialism must be to this experience that I see a nice brown table. Well, how much does the subject contributes and how much does the world contribute? It's a unique feature of Vedic thought in Bhagavad Gita. Of course, Bhagavad Gita is expanded better in Srimad Bhagavatam. So it is a unique feature of Vedic thought that every word in this sentence is produced by matter. So even the I is coming from matter. So that's called the apparent I, that's called the false ego. So let me just go back to this. See here, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. All these constitute my separated material energies. So false ego is the one that makes the I come up. And, mind is also another level of matter. So there is this idea of levels of matter. So just like if you have an apple, real apple, it's a fruit. But you can make a 2D representation of the apple. You can make a drawing and it can capture the shape of the apple in 2 dimensions, its color, but it cannot capture its texture and all that. Whereas in a 3D apple, plastic apple could actually have capture the shape in 3 dimensions, its color and its texture, even you might try to produce, and its weight like that, but it still cannot reproduce the taste. So similarly, the soul actually has got original consciousness and mind and intelligence and everything, and those can be reflected in matter, like 2-dimensional this. So we are living in a world in which that is the whole idea of Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, and quite surprisingly, in science there are a lot of connections to these ideas. But we are living in a world in which all our experiences are external to us. It's imposed on you. You are not experiencing them, but they are experiences. So just like if you're going in a bus, you are not moving because you're sitting in the bus, but still you cannot say you're not moving because you're in the bus and the bus is moving. So material energy, when it is organized in these 8 levels, Krishna is saying it's a great science. It has to be brought out. So this whole thing actually produces our conscious experience, which is imposed on the soul. So you cannot say you are experiencing it because it's matter, just like you are not moving, the bus is moving. But nor can you say you are not moving because you are going from Bombay to Delhi in the bus. So similarly, you are actually misidentifying that with that experience, and you are giving your own reactions, which are not necessary. Just like when you go to a movie, a comedy scene is there, you enjoy, and there's a tragic scene there, you cry. These are not this is not necessary, but you identify with it. Similarly, we are identifying with the material energy and we are suffering and enjoying, but these are not ours. So the whole idea of spiritual life is to go beyond. But before you can get to this mind and intelligence and everything, you have to understand the basic matter. In physics, that's what I'm bringing in. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely, you did. Attaining true enlightenment requires detachment from the materialistic world, right?
Huh?
But in the
What did you say?
so attaining true enlightenment requires detachment from the materialistic world, right? But in the present
No,
era,
no,
achieving
no, it's not required. It's not possible also. You cannot be detached. Because if you're sitting in a bus and you want to separate how I'm not moving, but the bus is moving, it's very, very difficult. And that's a difficult and generally not successful path. But there's another path which is better. But let me not interrupt your question. Go on.
Okay, but in the present era, achieving complete detachment may not be entirely feasible. So,
Hmm.
how can one reach enlightenment with still fulfilling their responsibilities as a son or student?
So this is a good point, but it's not only that in this era it's difficult to be detached. In any era, it's difficult to be detached. Even if you take the old time, Satyuga and all that, even great sages, they have had problems. Vishwamitra very famously, cohabited with Menaka, and I think Shakuntala was born as a result of like that. It's there. So it always happens. So it is not a good idea to try and detach ourselves, but we have to dovetail everything. So the idea is that material experiences can be spiritualized if they are used in Krishna's service. Just like a computer is not by itself material. It depends on how you use it. So if we are using it to, say, watch some movies, it may be material. But if we are discussing like this with a Zoom connection, Bhagavad Gita, and then it's spiritual. So nothing is material by itself. That is the idea. It's a deeper idea than saying, I'm spirit and I'm not matter and I want to separate from matter. You say that even matter actually can be spiritualized if it is used in the service of Krishna. That is a lesson of Bhagavad Gita. So in the modern times, the question is, how can the students actually practice renunciation? It is not necessary to renounce matter, but students can also dovetail, connect matter to Krishna, God, and that's exactly what this whole thing is about. So, for example, if somebody wanted to do quantum computing, I can give some projects that are completely connected to Krishna. Like I'm working in quantum mechanics. I write papers in which there is no mention of anything other than matter, but still it's spiritualized because it's connected to Krishna. So if the education process is actually taught in such a way that we are doing actual science, yet at the same time, the science is compatible with, linking it to Krishna, then that would be the revolution. And the work I'm doing can offer that. It's not one man's job. It requires actually, the involvement of government, industry, and educational institutions and everything. But did I answer your question?
Are there any management principle inspired by Bhagavad Gita?
Like I said, it's not one man's job. So I don't generally hold forth on everything. For example, if it were to be asked, what is the connection between Bhagavad Gita and agricultural science? That can be made, but it requires work. So be it economics, psychology, management, history, mathematics, physics, everything can be connected. The Bhagavad Gita view on these can be connected to these fields. So specifically about management, there was one professor called Chakravarti in IIM Ahmedabad way back in the 70s. He wrote one of the first books on management and ancient Indian thought, long time ago. But no one has actually succeeded, other than platitudes. So I would say, based on my work in physics, that we should know that psychology is very much based on physics. People may not know it, but the behaviorism in psychology came from the mechanistic viewpoint of Newton's physics. So if physics changes, we can also apply those principles to psychology and management. Psychology is not necessarily a bad word. It can be used. So in order to actually apply Bhagavad Gita to psychology, our management science, human sciences, we need students who are willing to do the hard work, which means you must first understand. Currently, psychology is based on behaviorism, functionalism, and you have to study those things. And all the human management sciences, human resources management is all based on that. And they should be willing to then actually understand the new physics that's being developed. This is why I'm working in physics, because it's most fundamental. And you should be able to apply it. So it's possible if a management student comes to me and says, I want to do a project in management, then I can say yes. And then some basic projects. In the beginning, you cannot directly apply, but at least we can do basic projects that develop they set up the stage. So it's possible, but you must be willing to do it, not superficially simply say, Bhagavad Gita says karma, be attached, not be attached to the fruit of the result of what you're doing. It's all nonsense. That's not what karma is. How can you do some work and not expect a result? That's not really what is the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. But most Hindus think like that. No, you should work and you should not be attached, you should be detached to the result. That's impossible. If you are doing running a company, you cannot say, I've made a lot of profit, but according to Bhagavad Gita, profit and loss are one and the same. So I've decided to treat my profit as loss, so I won't be paying any tax. No, government will put you behind bars. So how can Krishna say something so impractical? No. So even karma is not properly understood. Therefore, if you want to apply Bhagavad Gita to management science, like I'm applying it to physics, and you can see, I have just shown you a glimpse of how deep you have to go to understand the nature of science, physics, in order to apply it. Similarly, you have to go very deeply. You have to study the history of ideas in management. For example, you take economics, for example. The history of ideas is that, this idea of concept of money, isn't it coming from somebody called Adam Smith? That's not my field anyway. I think Adam Smith actually developed the modern concept of money. Then you have, somebody like Karl Marx, who actually had his own ideas of, economics. So you have to study all of that, and you have to penetrate it better than them. In order to connect Bhagavad Gita to physics, I had to do physics better than modern physicists. You cannot do it the way they do and connect it. So whoever is really interested in any field, he can actually, your institute can collaborate with us, and I'm a approved research guide at University of Mumbai. So this is a real academic work. It's possible. Can I answer the question?
Of course. So thank you, sir, for sparing your time. We got to learn a lot from you. It taught how to embrace our lives, challenges, and courage and conviction. You actually gave us a lot of life lessons, and how modern science and Bhagavad Gita are interrelated with each other. Okay. And lastly, I'd like to thank our director, sir, Dr. Suslendra Desai, and our faculty mentors, Dr. Smita Bunde and Harshal Kotwal, sir, for their constant support and guidance. And lastly, we would like to thank all the wonderful participants for joining us today and making this a successful session. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Desai, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. That was very enlightening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.